Imagine a world where simply looking slightly nervous while you're watching the evening news is a crime. Like a crime punishable by death.
Right, a complete nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. Where your own smart TV is watching you back and your kids are actively trained to report you to the police if you happen to talk in your sleep.
It is the absolute definition of a psychological prison.
It really is. You know, you've probably heard the phrase, Big Brother is watching. Or maybe you've called some creepy new corporate policy Orwellian. But today, we are going to uncover the real, blood-soaked history that birthed that whole nightmare.
In understanding how that prison was built, it requires us to look at one of the most influential texts of the 20th century.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are opening up a massive file of source material today, doing a comprehensive deep dive on George Orwell's 1949 dystopian masterpiece, 1984.
Yes, a classic.
But listen, our mission today is not to just give you like a high school book report.
No, definitely not.
We are treating this as a forensic investigation. So for you, the listener, the mission is to uncover exactly how this terrifying world was engineered, the real historical events that inspired its architecture.
Right, and why its vocabulary so thoroughly dominates the reality you and I live in right now.
Exactly. So to set the stage for anyone who might need a quick refresher.
Sure, so the story drops us into this really bleak, fictional future. It is supposedly the year 1984, though the characters aren't even sure of the real date because, well, history is constantly being erased.
Right.
We are in Airstrip 1, which used to be Great Britain, and it's now just this province of a totalitarian superstate called Oceania.
Ruled by the party.
Exactly, ruled with an iron fist by a political regime known simply as the Party, and its figurehead is the omnipresent, totally mysterious Big Brother.
And trapped right in the middle of all this is our protagonist, Winston Smith. He's this mid-level worker at the Ministry of Truth, where his daily job is literally to rewrite history to fit whatever the party is currently claiming.
Which is such a wild concept.
It is. But secretly, Winston harbors these dreams of rebellion. He really just wants to know what truth actually is.
Which brings us to the fascinating origin of this world. Because to understand a world that bleak, you really have to look at the man who built it.
George Orwell.
Right, and the absolute physical agony he was experiencing at the time. I mean, when we picture an author writing a masterpiece, we often imagine a cozy study, a warm cup of tea.
Right, a quiet little desk.
Exactly. That could not be further from Orwell's reality. He wrote 1984 while suffering from a fatal case of tuberculosis.
A fatal case. So he was a dying man, writing a warning to the world.
He was. And he didn't just write it while sick. He deliberately isolated himself in one of the harshest environments imaginable.
Oh, the Scottish island, right?
Yeah, he moved to a place called Barnhill. It was a remote farmhouse on the island of Jura.
Wow.
We are talking about a brutal landscape with absolutely no electricity and no hot water. The physical toll this took on his body it's hard to even comprehend.
I mean, okay, let's unpack this for a second. It's as if Orwell was desperately writing a survival guide for humanity while his own personal world was literally collapsing.
A survival guide is the perfect way to look at it. The sheer willpower involved is just staggering. By the time he was finishing the second draft in late 1948, his manuscript was an absolute mess of cross-outs and revisions.
I can imagine.
Yeah, he had asked his publisher to send a typist to this remote island, but they couldn't find anyone willing to make the journey on short notice.
Wait, really no one would go?
No one. And the draft was so chaotic that only Orwell himself could decipher it anyway.
Oh my God. So picture this incredibly visceral scene, right? George Orwell confined to his bed, dealing with recurring night sweats, coughing up blood, and he's lost almost 28 pounds.
Just wasting away.
And he is sitting there, hammering away on a manual typewriter at a rate of 4,000 words a day.
It's unbelievable.
He is typing the final manuscript himself because literally no one else on Earth can do it.
And that desperation really bleeds into the text. I mean, even the title of this survival guide was up in the air until the final moments.
Oh, right, the title.
Yeah, there's a persistent myth that the title 1984 was chosen simply as a clever inversion of the year 1948, the year he finished writing it.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one for years.
Yeah.
It always seemed a little too neat, to be honest.
Because it is. I mean, scholars and early drafts debunked that theory completely.
Really? So what was it supposed to be?
Well, Orwell originally considered setting the story 1980, and then he shifted it to 1982.
Okay.
And for a long time, the working title wasn't a year at all. It was The Last Man in Europe.
Oh, wow. The Last Man in Europe, that's bleak.
It is. It was only later that he settled on 1984, largely because his publisher pushed for it, arguing it was a more commercially viable and, intriguing title.
That feverish state he was in, it really birthed this absolute nightmare world. But the architecture of Oceania wasn't entirely a product of his imagination, was it?
Not at all.
Because he was heavily borrowing from the totalitarian regimes he was watching rise to power right then in the 1940s.
Exactly. He was holding a mirror directly up to Stalinist Russia. The parallels are deliberate and highly, highly specific.
Right.
Take the figurehead of Big Brother, for example. Orwell describes him as a man with a heavy mustache, peering down from posters everywhere.
Which bears a striking resemblance to the cult of personality built around Joseph Stalin.
Precisely.
And the ultimate enemy of the state in the novel, Emmanuel Goldstein, matches that perfectly too. Goldstein is described as having this small goatee beard and a halo of white hair.
Right, which is a direct visual evocation of the exiled Soviet leader Leon Trotsky.
Yeah. And he pulls the mechanics of brainwashing straight from history, too.
He does. In the book, there's this daily ritual called the 2 minutes hate, where citizens are forced to scream at a screen showing Goldstein.
Oh, right.
And during this film, Goldstein's face magically transforms into a bleeding sheep.
Right.
Orwell didn't invent that visual trick. That imagery was lifted directly from the Kino Eye period of the 1920s.
The Kino Eye period.
Yeah, it was an experimental Soviet documentary movement where filmmakers used montage to manipulate reality. One actual Soviet propaganda film showed Trotsky transforming into a goat to mock him.
Wow. He's just pulling these details straight from reality. And that actually brings up one of the most terrifying concepts in the book, the equation 2 + 2 = 5.
Oh, yes.
In the story, the party uses this equation to physically and psychologically break Winston's mind. They torture him until he truly believes that if the party says 2 + 2 = 5, it is 5.
It's brutal.
It's not about making a math error, right? It's about forcing a citizen to completely surrender their reliance on objective reality.
That psychological mechanism is totally key. If the state can convince you that your own eyes and your logical faculties are lying to you, well, you become entirely dependent on them for truth. And again, this wasn't just abstract philosophy. 2 + 2 = 5 was an actual physical Communist Party slogan used in the Soviet Union.
Wait, really? A real slogan?
Yes. It was part of their second 5-year plan. It was designed to encourage workers to fulfill the industrial quotas in just 4 years.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, they displayed the equation 2 + 2 = 5 in massive electric lights on house fronts and billboards all over Moscow.
That is so eerie.
Right. Orwell saw a motivational slogan about industrial production and realized just how easily it could be warped into a mandate for the total surrender of reality.
And that connects directly to Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth. If the party executes someone, Winston has to go back through the historical archives, the newspapers, the photographs, and erase their existence entirely.
The person becomes an unperson. They never existed.
Exactly.
Which was a routine reality in the Soviet Union. The state actively airbrushed fallen politicians out of official group photographs.
Right, the famous missing people in photos.
Yeah. There's this chilling historical detail Orwell drew from regarding Lavrenti Beria.
The high-ranking Soviet official.
Exactly. When Beria fell from power and was executed, he obviously couldn't remain in the official Great Soviet Encyclopedia.
Of course not. But those books were already printed and in people's homes, right?
Right. So the publishers literally mailed a letter to all their subscribers, instructing them to take scissors, cut out the 3-page article on Beria, destroy it, and paste in replacement pages they had provided about the Bering Sea and Bishop Berkeley.
I mean, think about the psychology of that. The state mailed you the cover-up, but they made you perform the physical act of censorship yourself.
Yes.
You had to cut up your own encyclopedia. We see that exact same rewriting of reality in the novel, when Oceania suddenly switches from fighting the superstate Eurasia to fighting Eastasia.
Mid-speech.
Mid-speech, the enemy changes, and suddenly the party claims they have always been at war with Eastasia.
That moment is Orwell directly critiquing the sudden Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact of 1939.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Right, because before the pact, the Soviet press vehemently and constantly attacked Germany. The moment the pact was signed, all criticism vanished overnight. History was instantly rewritten to fit the new alliance, and citizens were expected to act as if the hostility had never existed.
But wait, looking at his life, Orwell was an Englishman working in London during the war. Was he really only looking east at Stalin? Didn't he draw from his own backyard to build this surveillance state?
That is a really crucial observation. He was explicitly warning about what totalitarianism would look like if it took root in English-speaking Western countries.
Okay, so he was looking closer to home.
Absolutely. The Ministry of Truth itself was heavily inspired by Orwell's own time working at the BBC during World War II, dealing with wartime censorship and the Ministry of Information.
Oh, wow.
In fact, the most terrifying place in the novel, Room 101.
The torture chamber.
Right, the torture chamber where a citizen is confronted with their absolute worst fear. That was named after a real, completely mundane conference room at BBC Broadcasting House where Orwell had to sit through incredibly tedious editorial meetings.
Naming the ultimate torture chamber after your office conference room is some incredibly dark workplace humor.
It really is.
So the architecture of Oceania is deeply rooted in the 1940s. But there is a glaring question here. To keep this regime running, you have to control millions of people. Let's look at the actual mechanics of how the party controls its citizens, because that is what makes this book feel so chillingly relevant to you and me today.
The surveillance state Orwell designed is totally comprehensive. In Oceania, the upper and middle classes have zero privacy, ever.
Right.
Their homes are equipped with telescreens, which are essentially two-way televisions. They broadcast constant party propaganda, but they also watch and listen to the citizens simultaneously.
So coupled with hidden microphones everywhere, the state's eyes are inescapable. And it goes far beyond just watching what you do or who you talk to. They monitor your involuntary nervous system reactions.
Face crime.
Yes, face crime. If a military victory is announced on the telescreen and you display an unconscious look of anxiety or even just a nervous tic, the thought police can arrest you for it.
The party's legal doctrine entirely rejects the old democratic principle that mere thought does not commit a crime. To the party, the thought is the only thing they care about, because a rebellious thought is the seed of treason.
Wow.
But how this massive surveillance apparatus is applied depends entirely on the rigid class system Orwell created.
So if the party's control is that absolute, they must surveil the poorest people the most heavily, right? Usually oppressed lower classes are the ones under the heaviest guard.
And that is the brilliant paradox Orwell introduces. At the top of society, you have the inner party. They live in relative luxury. They have real coffee, real sugar, wine, and they even have the privilege of turning their telescreens off for short periods. Then you have the outer party, which Winston belongs to. This is the middle management. They are surveilled 24/7, living in these dilapidated, brutalist apartments, subsisting on terrible synthetic food, oily Victory brand gin, and cheap cigarettes.
And then at the bottom, making up about 85% of the population are the proles, the working class.
You're right.
And they actually have more freedom. They aren't heavily surveilled at all. They don't even have telescreens in their homes.
Because the party believes the proles lack the intellect or the organization to rebel. They don't need to be watched because they are kept completely docile through distraction. The state floods their neighborhoods with synthetic entertainment, sentimental songs, pornography produced entirely by machines, and a fake national lottery where the big prizes go to non-existent people.
So they are controlled by distraction, not by fear.
Exactly.
But if you are in the outer party, the fear is absolute. There's this incredibly tragic secondary character named Tom Parsons. He is Winston's neighbor.
Oh, Parsons.
Yeah. Parsons is the ultimate unquestioning loyal party member. He believes everything that telescreen tells him, sweats profusely for the party's causes, never questions a thing. But later in the book, Winston runs into Parsons in the Ministry of Love, imprisoned as a traitor.
And the mechanism of his downfall is the most chilling part. Do you recall who turned him in?
His own 7-year-old daughter.
Yes.
She was part of the party's youth organization, the Spies. She heard her father muttering something against Big Brother while he was talking in his sleep.
In his sleep.
Right. And she instantly reported him to the thought police. And the saddest, most broken part of that entire scene is that Parsons is actually proud of her for doing it.
That's so twisted.
He thinks it shows he raised a good citizen.
It perfectly illustrates the total destruction of family loyalty. The state replaces the family. A child's loyalty is completely redirected from their parents to Big Brother.
It's essentially like having a modern smart device in your living room that watches you back, listens to everything you say, but you are physically forbidden from putting it on airplane mode.
Right.
And the manufacturers actively trained your kids to report you if you ever complain about the device.
That is the exact dynamic. But Seeing these brutal methods of control, the surveillance, the torture, the destruction of family, it naturally sparks a massive philosophical debate that has raged among readers and critics for decades.
Oh, we have to talk about the Huxley debate.
I do, because the debate centers on causality. Does fear actually work best? Did Orwell predict the future accurately, or did another famous author actually understand human nature better?
Right. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World.
Published 17 years before 1984. In 1949, after reading Orwell's book, Huxley actually wrote a letter directly to Orwell.
I would love to have seen Orwell's face reading that letter. How did Huxley critique it?
Well, Huxley praised the book's brilliance, but he fundamentally disagreed with its core premise regarding how power is maintained. In Orwell's future, as the inner party member O'Brien famously explains to Winston, the vision of the future is a boot stamping on a human face, forever.
Forever.
It is control achieved purely through pain, torture, strict censorship, and trauma.
Brute force and information starvation.
Yes. But Huxley argued that future oligarchies would realize that the boot on the face is terribly inefficient. It requires too much energy to constantly torture people.
That makes sense.
He believed that instead of punishing people into submission, rulers would control people through pleasure. Huxley's vision relied on narco-hypnosis, the idea of using sleep learning and drugs to condition people from birth so they actually learn to love their oppression.
Wow.
In Orwell's world, the government bans books so no one can read them. In Huxley's world, there's no reason to ban a book because people are so overwhelmed with trivial information and endless synthetic entertainment that no one wants to read one anyway.
So I have to ask you, the listener, when you look around at the world today, what do you see? Are we living in Orwell's nightmare of strict censorship, fear, and constant surveillance? Or are we living in Huxley's nightmare of endless distraction, trivial entertainment, and loving our servitude?
It's the ultimate societal question. And modern cultural critics generally suggest we have somehow managed to create a complex, terrifying mix of both.
A mix of both.
Yeah, we have the mass surveillance and data collection infrastructures that Orwell warned about, running in tandem with the endless synthetic entertainment and information overload that Huxley predicted.
It's fascinating to see how critics reacted to this bleak vision right when it was published. The writer V.S. Pritchett immediately recognized its genius, calling it frightening and original. But it definitely ruffled feathers.
Oh, it did. The author C.S. Lewis heavily criticized the romance plot between Winston and Julia as lacking credibility, famously calling the setting of the book odious rather than tragic.
Interesting.
And the Marxist historian Isaac Deutscher called Orwell a simple-minded anarchist, arguing the novel was nothing more than anti-communist Cold War propaganda.
But whether humanity is ultimately controlled by pain or by pleasure, the vocabulary of 1984 has completely infected our modern reality. It has proved its incredible lasting power in both culture and politics.
The linguistic legacy alone is unparalleled. Orwell introduced us to newspeak, doublethink, thought crime, and unperson.
Yeah.
And it is vital to understand the mechanism of these words. Take newspeak, for example. The goal of the party's official language isn't to add words to the dictionary to help citizens express themselves.
Right.
The goal is to systematically destroy words. If the party removes the word freedom from the dictionary, the very concept of freedom becomes literally unthinkable.
And doublethink is the psychological mechanism of holding two completely contradictory beliefs in your mind at the exact same time and genuinely believing both of them because the party demands it. We still use Orwellian to describe anything vaguely authoritarian today.
Absolutely.
The cultural footprint is massive. I mean, think of Apple's famous 1984 Macintosh commercial, directed by Ridley Scott, which positioned their new personal computer as the hammer to smash Big Brother.
A classic ad.
And David Bowie based a huge chunk of his Diamond Dogs album on the novel's themes. And in the ultimate irony, there is a worldwide hit reality TV show called Big Brother, where people willingly lock themselves in a house to be watched 24/7 by cameras for entertainment.
The irony of willingly participating in a surveillance state for a cash prize is profound. But the book's influence on real-world political discourse is even more striking. There have been several moments in recent history where sales of the book suddenly skyrocketed, reflecting immediate public anxieties about government power.
And as a crucial note for this deep dive, we're just looking at the documented data from the publishers here, neutrally observing how the public reacts to the news cycle. We aren't taking any political sides here. Sales of 1984 spiked massively twice in the 2010s.
Right.
The first time was in 2013.
And that massive spike aligned perfectly with the leaks regarding the National Security Agency's mass surveillance program.
The NSA leaks.
Exactly. When the public learned about the bulk data collection of private emails and phone records, people instantly saw government surveillance in the news, and sales of Orwell's novel increased by up to 7 times in a single week.
And the second massive spike happened in 2017, when a political spokesperson went on television and used the phrase alternative facts to explain a discrepancy with the media's reporting.
Yes.
The moment the public heard the phrase alternative facts, the book shot straight back to the top of the Amazon bestseller list. Again, completely, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, these sales spikes are fascinating barometers. When people feel objective truth or privacy is threatened, they instinctively reach for Orwell.
It functions as an emergency cultural touchstone, but perhaps the most profound irony of the book's entire legacy is how it has been treated by actual modern authoritarian regimes globally. Look at the stark contrast between China and the Soviet Union.
Wait, I would assume an authoritarian state like China would ban this book immediately. Is it because they think their citizens just won't understand the political metaphors?
Close. It's actually twofold. The novel is widely available in mainland China. Journalists point out you can buy it in Shenzhen or Shanghai just as easily as in London.
Really?
Yeah. The prevailing theory is that the authorities assume the general masses don't read dense political literature. And secondly, the political and corporate elites who do read it are generally so well connected to the ruling party's benefits that the government simply doesn't view their reading habits as a genuine threat.
That is wild.
They assume the people smart enough to understand the warning are too comfortable to act on it.
That is a deeply cynical view of human nature. But contrast that with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The book was strictly banned there until 1988.
Officially, yes, it was banned.
Right.
But unofficially, the story is entirely different. In 1959, the ideological department of the Central Committee ordered a secret Russian translation of the novel to be produced.
A secret translation.
Yes, and this translation was printed exclusively for the senior officers of the Communist Party.
So, as the late writer Christopher Hitchens pointed out, this is where it gets incredibly meta. Orwell's novel features a major plot point about a secret, subversive book written by Emmanuel Goldstein that circulates only among the inner party.
Right.
Because of that secret translation in 1959, Orwell's fictional novel became an actual secret book circulating only within the Soviet inner party.
Hitchens called it one of the greatest compliments one writer has ever bestowed upon another. The Soviet elite recognized their own political architecture in the text so perfectly that they treated the novel exactly the way the inner party in the book treats subversive literature.
You cannot write a better irony than that. So, to synthesize this entire journey, we've gone from a dying man in a freezing dark farmhouse in Scotland, coughing up blood to type a warning to the world, to a text that became the definitive blueprint of authoritarianism for the modern age.
It is the ultimate cautionary tale. It forces us to examine the mechanics of control. It warns us how easily language can be systematically corrupted, how easily historical archives can be erased, and how incredibly fragile our grasp on objective reality truly is when power becomes an end in itself.
And for you listening, hopefully, you now have a much deeper understanding of the forensic history behind the terms you hear every single day. The next time someone mentions doublethink or jokes about Room 101, you understand the real-world terror and the psychological mechanisms that birth those concepts.
But before we conclude today's deep dive, there is one final, mind-bending detail buried at the very back of the book. It is an Easter egg that fundamentally changes the entire meaning of the narrative.
Yes. This completely changes how you read the entire novel.
After the bleak final chapter, the novel ends with an appendix titled The Principles of Newspeak.
Right.
It reads like an academic essay explaining the mechanics of the party's language. But if you pay close attention to the grammar, this appendix is not written in Newspeak. It is written in Standard English.
Standard English.
And more importantly, it is written entirely in the past tense.
The narrator of the appendix is analyzing the party, Big Brother, and Newspeak as if they are historical artifacts, as if they are safely in the past.
Precisely. Many literary critics have pointed out the massive implications of this structural choice. Newspeak was designed to shrink the boundaries of human thought until rebellion was impossible.
Right.
But by placing this past tense standard English essay at the very end of the text, Orwell may have actually written a secret, structurally optimistic ending. It heavily implies that Newspeak ultimately failed, that standard English and the broad human thought it allows survived, and that eventually Big Brother and the party must have collapsed.
Someone in the future is looking back at Oceania. It means the dictionary.
You know, the vast, beautiful collection of words we use to think, to build, and to rebel, it ultimately survived the weaponization. I want you to mull that over. Because even in his darkest, most physically isolated hour, George Orwell didn't just leave us a warning. He might have hidden a blueprint for hope right there in the grammar. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Keep your dictionary close, hold on to objective truth, and we'll see you next time.